feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Changes, changing on the daily. Watch me flip the pages, flipping all the pages of my story. Weightless, I've been feeling weightless, fresher than the daydream. Look at me, I'll change it right before me. I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Stand tall cause I know what I've been through. Talk loud cause I know what I can do. Been down but I know how to get through. I do what I want to. I change with the vibe when I walk in. I'm chasing all that I wanted. On fire cause I know how to spark it. I do what I want to. Stay up and I brighten the room up. I trust how I shine like true love. Best part of the night like what's up. I do what I want to. Changes, changing on the daily. Watch me flip the pages, flipping all the pages of my story. Weightless, I've been feeling weightless, fresher than the daydream. Look at me, I'll change it right before me. I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Stand tall cause I know what I've been through. Talk loud cause I know what I can do. Been down but I know how to get through. I do what I want to. 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 I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Stand tall cause I know what I've been through. Talk loud cause I know what I can do. Been down but I know how to get through. I do what I want to. I just gotta be honest. I don't like the way she dresses, or the way that she pronounces her S's. And I'm just saying what they're thinking, cause they don't know you, no, like I know you, no. I'm not trying to be pretentious, but we know what we had was the bestest. Now you're hiding behind white picket fences, and she knows she don't know you, no, like I know you, no. Not that I'm supposed to be nice and everything, on some feminism shit, yeah. Know that it's not with me, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's not. I just think she's kinda ugly. I'm not trying to be cruel, but the way she calls you happy before the altar alters you, and you'll know I'm not trying to waste your time, but I know if I had some, I would change your mind. I just think she's kinda ugly, and that she's not the one for you. Let's not get this confused. Look at her and look at you. Yeah. She'll mess up your genetic pool, and I would never do that. I would just improve that. Not that I'm supposed to be nice and everything, on some feminism shit, yeah. Know that it's not with me, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's not. I just think she's kinda ugly. I'm not trying to be cruel, but the way she calls you happy before the altar alters you, and you'll know I'm not trying to waste your time, but I know if I had some, I would change your mind. I just think she's kinda ugly, and that she's not the one for you, for you.
I don't know if I'm like more concerned or confused. That's the thing. It just doesn't make any sense. But why? Why would you do that though? Like,
I just think she's kinda ugly. I'm not trying to be cruel,
don't need to.
but
why?
the way she calls you happy
It just seems unnecessary.
before the altar alters you,
I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad.
and
Not
you'll know I'm not trying to waste your time, but I know if I had some, I would change your mind. I just think she's kinda ugly, and that she's not the one for you. Why haven't they said anything yet? Why haven't I said anything yet? Hold on. Alright. 2 looking at you. Oh yeah, craving you like all afternoon. Someday I'll be getting a taste. Kiss ya from your tummy to your nose to your waist. Like eating a cake. Oh yeah, oh, I can't wait. I'm gonna be the snack that smiles back. I'm gonna be the kid to your cat. The snack that smiles back. The kid to your cat. I'm gonna be the one you unwrap. Just take me out and break me in half. The snack that smiles back. The kid to your cat. Cake pop on the tip of my tongue. You belong there like the frosting on a cinnamon bun. Oh yeah, I'ma eat it till it's making me young. Oh yeah, flip me like an Oreo and dip me in a cup of your Joe. Cause neither one of us is gonna taste as good if we're on our own. Falling like a skittle, I'll be filling up the palm of your hand. I'll be skinny dipping, feeling dizzy from your butt at the can. I'm gonna be the snack that smiles back. I'm gonna be the kid to your cat. The snack that smiles back. The kid to your cat. I'm gonna be the one you unwrap. Just take me out and break me in half. The snack that smiles back. The kid to your cat. I'm gonna be the snack that smells back. I'm gonna be the kid to your cat. I'm gonna be the one you unwrap. Just take me out and break me in half. The snack that smells back. The kid to your cat. I'm gonna be the snack that smells back. I'm gonna be the kid to your cat. The snack that smells back. The kid to your cat. I'm gonna be the one you unwrap. Just take me out and break me in half. The snack that smells back. The kid to your cat. I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Changes, changing on the daily. Watch me flip the pages. Flipping all the pages of my story. Weightless, I've been feeling weightless. Fresher than the daydream. Look at me, I'm changing right before me. I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Stand tall cause I know what I've been through. Talk loud cause I know what I can do. Been down but I know how to get through. I do what I want to. I change with the vibe when I walk in. I'm chasing all that I'm wanting. I'm fire cause I know how to spark it. I do what I want to. Stay up and I brighten the room up. I trust how I shine like true love. Best part of the night like what's up. I do what I want to. Changes, changing on the daily. Watch me flip the pages. Flipping all the pages of my story. Weightless, I've been feeling weightless. Fresher than the daydream. Look at me, I'm changing right before me. I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Stand tall cause I know what I've been through. Talk loud cause I know what I can do. Been
gotta be honest.
I don't like the way she dresses, or the way that she pronounces her S's. And I'm just saying what they're thinking, cause they don't know you, no, like I know you, no. I'm not trying to be pretentious, but we know what we had was the bestest. Now you're hiding behind white picket fences, and she knows she don't know you, no, like I know you, no. Not that I'm supposed to be nice and everything, on some feminism shit, yeah. Know that it's not with me, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's not. I just think she's kinda ugly. I'm not trying to be cruel, but the way she calls you happy before the altar alters you, and you know I'm not trying to waste your time, but I know if I had some I would change your mind. I just think she's kinda ugly, and that she's not the one for you. Let's not get this confused. Look at her and look at you, yeah. She'll mess up your genetic pool, and I would never do that. I would just improve that. Know that I'm supposed to be nice and everything, on some feminism shit, yeah. Know that it's not with me, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's not. I just think she's kinda ugly. I'm not trying to be cruel, but the way she calls you happy before the altar alters you, and you know I'm not trying to waste your time, but I know if I had some I would change your mind. I just think she's kinda ugly, and that she's not the one for you, for you.
I don't know if I'm like more concerned or confused. That's the thing. It just doesn't make any sense. But why? Why would you do that though? Like,
I just think she's kinda ugly. I'm not trying to be cruel,
don't need to.
but
why?
the way she calls you happy
It just seems unnecessary.
before the altar alters
I'm not
you,
even mad about it. I'm not mad. I'm not
and
even
you
mad.
know I'm not trying to waste your time, but I know if I had some I would change your mind. I just think she's kinda ugly, and that she's not the one for you. Why haven't they said anything yet? Why haven't I said anything yet? Hold on. Alright. 2, hit.
Hello there, Athenians! Here is what you need to know about the Alternative Class Program, or ACP. The ACP is conducted every semester to provide college students with formative opportunities outside of their regular classroom routine and daily schedule in support of the university's uniquely Jesuit educational goals. Instead of attending their class for a particular period, students choose at least one ACP topic from among the offered webinars and e-workshops. Carefully selected resource speakers from different fields of specialization are invited to share their knowledge, skills, and inspire students to nurture their personal development and partake in social advocacies or causes. We thank you for your participation in the first ever virtual ACP last semester, which recorded an all-time high attendance turnout and received an overwhelmingly affirmative evaluation from students. Because of the ACP's affirming results and positive impact, we are continuing with a bigger and better ACP. However, the program shall still be carried out via digital platforms to ensure everyone's safety. The theme for a semester's ACP is Cannonballs, Firing Up Dreams, Courage, Action. This theme is inspired by the conversion of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, founder of Society of Jesus. Just as Saint Ignatius was hit by a cannonball, which altered his life and drew him to a greater calling, this ACP hopes to fight up university's call for students to have dreams, discern, and how these dreams contribute to one's personal improvement and the common good, master courage, and find ways to accomplish these dreams. To do this, ACP offerings are carefully chosen to be relevant to the current times, formative, and mission-driven. The webinars and e-workshops hope to start a conversation on one's life in the pandemic and the varied factors that affect it and facilitate personal and even community reflection and discernment. Who knows? These virtual activities could fire up meaningful cannonball moments in you, their students. At the end of the webinars and e-workshops, the ACP hopes for the following objectives. First, acquire knowledge and/or skills that are relevant to one's interest, talent, skill, passion, or advocacy. Second, relate to share the learning and insight gained from the topic or activity in one conversation or dialogue and
thank
personal
you for joining
reflection.
us.
Third, examine the importance of one's interest, talent, skill, passion, or advocacy to the development of the society. And fourth, seek ways or opportunities by which the gained knowledge and skills can be further advanced and used for the benefit of the immediate organization, community, or larger society. For now, we would like you to listen to the speakers sharing and take part in the conversation. Dream, have courage, take action, And don't forget to learn and have fun while we experience ACP Ateneans.
Good afternoon, Ateneans, and thank you for joining us in today's very timely and relevant webinar. My name is Danielle and Filio, and you can call me Danny, and I am your host for today's special webinar of the alternative class program entitled Do No Harm, Conflict Sensitivity, and Peace Promotion. Holman McCarthy once said, and I quote, "Unless we teach children peace, someone else will teach them violence." Peace education is essential in every society, especially in countries and territories with experiences of war and conflict, such as the Philippines. The issue of peace and the task of peace education, however, is not easy, as there are several social issues interwoven when we talk about peace, when we discuss conflict. But no matter how difficult it may be, peace education is a must, especially in schools. That is why we are here doing this very important ACP event. This afternoon's webinar intends to give insight on the process of the government in ending conflicts in the country through peace talks and many other interventions. And we are very fortunate to have with us today a woman who is at the front lines of understanding the inner workings of conflict and promoting peace in our country. Our special guest for today is the Director for Knowledge Management and Peace Institute Department of the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, Director May E. Ballena. But before that, I would like to give a few reminders for us to observe online etiquettes. First, kindly mute your microphones to avoid distracting the speaker and your fellow participants. However, you may want to open your cameras only if possible, but if your internet does not permit, then it is okay. Second, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send your messages through Zoom chat or the YouTube comment section, since we are also live on the ADNU OSA YouTube channel. We encourage our YouTube viewers to participate in the comment section, and we will address your inquiries on the open forum later. We will be issuing e-certificates, but first, you need to stay throughout the event and accomplish the evaluation form that will be given at the end of this webinar. I hope that these guidelines are clear, but before we begin the program proper, I hope we are all ready for today's talk, for us to be able to know the facts and important insights about the ACP topic. So without further ado, may I invite everyone to settle down and prepare for the opening prayer. Let us now dispose ourselves in the presence of our Lord.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us be present to the Lord our God, who is in our midst, God of all knowledge and wisdom, who inflames our minds with a passion to learn and to understand. God of all creation, who enlivens our imaginations with the desires to build and to create. God of all hope, who transforms our hearts with a yearning for the world of your wildest dreams. We thank you for gathering us together here to praise you by our own words and works. We praise you for the knowers and the seekers, the builders and the makers, the lovers and the dreamers, who are gathered to attend the online alternative classes program in our university. We offer everything to you throughout this program. We beg you, Lord, to bless and protect from all harm all the participants, facilitators, and the organizers of this alternative classes program. We pray that you bless all the persons in charge of this program, that they may fulfill their tasks diligently and responsibly. This pandemic has forced us to create and to expand new ways of learning about ourselves, our country, and our common home. We know that without your grace, we can do nothing. May we be living witnesses of your genuine love through the implementations of the knowledge and skills acquired through this alternative classes program. Help us to live lives of abundant faith, steadfast hope, and undying love during this time of the pandemic. Following the example of Our Lady of Peña Francia, our Mother, and Saint Francis Xavier, our patron. Send us your Spirit, O Lord. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Maraming salamat, Father Cel Reyes of the Society of Jesus, for that beautiful prayer. And salamat, Jack Ivan Audal, for the audio recording. And now to give us the welcoming remarks, we have with us our very own Mr. Rodolfo Sonny S.E. Virtus Jr., Director of the Office of Student Affairs.
Good day, everyone. Your Office of Student Affairs and our partners are inspired by the results of the previous semester's first ever Virtual Alternative Class Program, or ACP. Because of your presence and affirmation, we achieved an all-time high student participation and received positive feedback for the major student formation program. More students took part in multiple events, more than the required. And this semester, we have continued working hard together to bring you another formative ACP experience, albeit virtually, because ACP is worth continuing, because ACP is mission-driven. We have organized 24 webinars and e-workshops of varied, relevant, carefully screened topics. We have a lineup of excellent speakers who have the capacity not only to inform you of urgent and relevant issues, but also to inspire you to engage in these issues, as well as give you the necessary break from your usual academic routines. The ACP event shall hopefully be instrumental in delivering the pivotal message of the theme, Cannonballs, Firing Up Dreams, Courage, Action. With the COVID-19 crisis still lingering and social problems besieging the people and the entire nation, we still dare to dream, not only for ourselves and for our immediate families, but for the larger society. This dreaming entails discernment toward the election of decisions, not only for our personal development, but for the common good, for that which brings us closer to God. All this dreaming, discerning, and actuating such dream demand enormous courage. There is an upcoming election that will either keep the status quo or elect change. In the pandemic response to health safety, vaccination, and economic recovery of people and institutions, in the treatment of human dignity and rights, in the preservation of truths, and in upholding justice and democracy, among others. And we, the Athenians, should be at the forefront of this campaign for change. Now, may the ACP challenge all of us, especially you, our dear students, to dream and to do so collectively for the good of the country, to have courage and to draw strength from each other and, of course, the truth, and to commit to dream and realize it no matter how difficult it may be. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the resource speakers who said yes to our invitation. Maraming salamat po for your generosity in sharing your expertise and insights. My gratitude also goes to the Office of the President, Office of the Vice President for Higher Education, Office of Mission and Identity, College Formation Council, Formation and Student Support Offices, College Ignition Formation Program, and National Service Training Program, and to all the offering academic departments and the student volunteers for all your great contributions to the conceptualization, preparation, and the actual implementation of the ACP. And to all the students, welcome po sa inyong lahat to the ACP offerings that you have chosen to attend. Learn and enjoy Ateneans. Diyos mabalos po sa Indogabos.
Thank you so much, Sir Sunny, for that very warm welcome. To those who have just joined in the Zoom chat and the Zoom meeting, and sa mga nanonood sa atin sa AdNoo sa YouTube channel, magandang hapon po. Once again, this is the ACP webinar you have chosen to attend. Do No Harm, Conflict Sensitivity and Peace Promotion. Allow me now to introduce our esteemed guest speaker. Director May Estenote Ballena holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the Mindanao State University General Santos and earned her MA in Political Science, Democratic Governance and Civil Society degree from the University of Osnabrück in Germany. As a recipient of a full scholarship grant from the German Academic Exchange Service Helmut Schmidt Program for the Public Policy and Good Governance. Ms. Ballena is a peace advocate and a youth volunteer who has been engaged in several youth-led peace-building initiatives, such as conducting peace education and for in-school and out-of-school youth in Sarangani and in Jensan. In 2012, she was chosen by the National Youth Commission as one of the Philippine participating youth to the 39th SHIP for Southeast Asian Youth Program. In 2015, she received the General Santos City Youth Achievers Award in the Young Professionals category from the City Government of General Santos. Professionally, Ms. Ballena has been working as a development practitioner for 9 years, both in government and non-government capacity. A significant part of her professional life was likewise spent in public service. She served as the Assistant Program Manager of Kalinaw Sarangani, the Provincial Peace and Development Program of Sarangani Province from 2010 to 2013, and as Executive Assistant to the former Secretary Corazon Dinky Soliman of the Department of Social Welfare and Development in 2013. Currently, she is the Director for Knowledge Management and Peace Institute Department of the Office of Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, an agency under the Office of the President of the Philippines mandated to oversee, integrate, and coordinate the implementation of the National Comprehensive Peace Process. With gratitude, let us all welcome Director May Estenote Ballena. A round of virtual applause, please.
Thank you very much. Maraming salamat, Danny. No? And thank you very much to Ateneo de Naga and Sir Sunny for inviting me. It is an honor, really, and a privilege to be with you. All right. So as mentioned a while ago, you are in the alternative class program for conflict sensitivity and peace promotion. And for this afternoon, we will try to study, or look into what is the do no harm. And I've also added the hands-on peace and conflict impact assessment. So next slide, please. My presentation for this afternoon will basically focus on two sessions. First is the lessons learned in do no harm, especially in conflict affected and conflict vulnerable context, and the areas of assessment for peace and conflict impact assessment. All right, sige po. So before we proceed, I'd like to know the thoughts now of some of our participants here. I'll put in here in the chat box. If our participants could go to menti.com and type in the code as shown in your slide. I've also put it in the chat box para okay, so that you can go through the link. And if I may be allowed to share my screen as well. All right. I hope you're in the Menti page already. There you go. So basically, there's a question there. No, I know you're all students, but eventually, and you will be working, and some of you might be involved in the development sector, or ngayon pa lang, I'm sure you have extension projects that you implement. So, what are the indicators of success and failure? Can you identify when implementing projects in the community? When can you say that your project has been successful? Kumbaga, paano mo masasabi na, oh, my project has been a success, or unfortunately, my project or our project failed? Sige, so let's see. Some of the responses here are cooperation, inclusivity, feedback, satisfaction. Okay, so many of you are saying cooperation, planning, no? Satisfaction, that's also feedback. Great. Okay. Effective, synergy. Nice. All right, so most of your responses really are process-oriented, no? You would say that your projects or interventions in the community has been a success if, you know, it was able to foster cooperation, get good feedback and satisfaction from your clients, produce results, good or bad results. I would assume that's good results, no? Teamwork, it's practical, it's effective, it's inclusive, it brought benefits to the community, no? Whatever those benefits are, no? Or as indicated in your project design. Okay. Progress, manpower, okay. Okay, I see some challenges here, like communications problem. Okay, someone said when your objectives are realized. All right, but many of you really focused on feedback, satisfaction, execution, teamwork, cooperation, and planning as the biggest words sa ating word cloud. All right, so few more seconds to key in your answers. Mamaya babalikan natin itong sagot ninyo. Sige. So most of the time, no, we're saying that most of the time when we implement projects in the community, our indicators of success and failure is always nagawa ba yung aming the objectives that we set from the very beginning, no? Kung nagawa ba siya, was there good planning, was there cooperation, was there teamwork na nabuo in the community. So this is actually correct, no? Like many of your responses are correct, and these are good indicators of success or failure once we implement our project. Okay, I'll stop sharing now. But when we work in conflict affected and conflict vulnerable areas, dito sa atin sa bansa natin, we do have areas here that are experiencing ongoing conflicts or are vulnerable to conflicts. No, walang gera, but anytime there will be conflicts that will break out, or violent conflicts that will break out. All right, next slide. Prior slide, please. Sorry. Okay, so what we're saying is that in the indicators that you have noted a while ago, those are good indicators, no? Those are correct indicators, no? To measure, kumbaga, if our projects, our activities have been a success or a failure. However, when we work in conflict affected and conflict vulnerable areas, we need to look beyond development indicators. We need to look beyond indicators as to ilan ba yung nag-benefit sa project ko in terms of access to, say, education. Or kung namigay tayo ng ng mga school supplies sa isang conflict-affected or conflict-vulnerable communities, ilang bata yung nabigyan natin ng school supplies. So we need to look beyond those kinds of indicators because any project, as Kenneth Bush has said, now in his paper, A Measure of Peace, the PCIA, or Peace and Conflict Impact Assessment of Projects in Conflict Zones, he emphasized that any project set in conflict-prone region will inevitably have an impact on the peace and conflict environment, whether that impact is positive or negative, direct or indirect, intentional or unintentional. Kasi sometimes, no, the impact, no matter how good our intentions are, sometimes we inadvertently produce bad results because probably we're not very careful with how we did our project. So there are many ways to monitor, as sabi nga natin, yung developmental impacts of our projects, no? Halimbawa, yung water system, capacity building program that we implement, or for your extension programs, kung nag-conduct kayo ng feeding program sa isang community, or when you brought in, resources or relief operations in a community. It's easy, no? It's easy to monitor and identify developmental impacts. Kasi we use indicators such as increased access to water supply, or increased literacy, or increased access to education, things like that. However, when our project is situated in a conflict-affected or conflict-vulnerable area, there are more than just developmental impacts to consider. Initiatives such as these affect and are affected by the dynamics of peace and conflict in the region. So therefore, it's important na tayo, eventually kayo, if you want to be development practitioners or in general, as peace actors or peace advocates, we assess the potential impact on the peace and conflict dynamics of the community. We assess the potential impacts of our interventions, of our projects, of our activities in the dynamics of the community. But how do we understand or measure these impacts beyond developmental lens, kumbaga? For this session, we will try to look into some of the tools and approaches that we may use or we may consider later when we do our projects in the community. How do we make our projects more sensitive to the conflict situation or your conflict sensitivity? Next slide, please. But what is conflict sensitivity really? But conflict sensitivity, this is the ability of an organization, tayo, to, number one, understand the context in which it is working. Hindi lang tayo basta-basta pumapasok sa isang lugar, hindi lang tayo basta-basta nagdadala ng project, but we understand what is happening in that community. We try to understand their context. Second, we try to understand the interaction of our interventions in that context. Dahil sabi nga natin, there is no such thing as neutral interventions, because we will eventually interact with the dynamics, local dynamics. And lastly, and more importantly, we act upon that understanding to minimize the negative impacts and maximize the positive impacts. Because the idea here is, yung conflict-affected area, these are sensitive communities. So if we are not careful, we might end up exacerbating the existing conflict in the community because of the interventions that we bring. All right, next slide. Pero ano ba yung pagkakaiba ng conflict sensitivity and peace building? Kasi yung peace building, madalas nating marinig yun, especially for those who are involved in peace and conflict studies, madalas yun. But what anong pinagkaiba ng conflict sensitivity and peace building, or are they the same? As mentioned, conflict sensitivity basically seeks to minimize the negative and maximize the positive impacts of programming. On the other hand, peace building naman refers to the measures designed to consolidate yung peaceful relations and strengthen yung viable political, socio-economic, and cultural institutions capable of handling and managing conflicts, and to strengthen other mechanisms that will either create or support the necessary conditions for peace. So, ang pinagkaiba nila, peace building looks at a bigger, broader picture, considering really the systems, processes, and structure in place, while conflict sensitivity is more purposive in a way. It's more of a programming tool. So this is a lens that we can use in looking at how we do our projects and our programs. And I think this is more applicable for those organizations, groups of people who want to do good in their community and bring in projects dun sa mga conflict affected areas natin. So what are these approaches that we can use? So we do have, one is the CSPM, or yung conflict sensitivity program management approach. We do have the better programming initiative. We have the do no harm approach, and of course the peace and conflict impact assessment, or the PCIA. So for this afternoon, we will try to focus on the two more mainstream approaches, which is the do no harm approach and the peace and conflict impact assessment. Next slide, please. Okay, first is the do no harm. But what is do no harm really? Saan siya nag-umpisa? Next slide. So the do no harm approach on conflict sensitivity, it started as a collaborative learning project way back 1994 pa, to answer basically the question of how can assistance of any kind be provided in ways that, rather than feeding into and exacerbating a conflict, could help local people to disengage and establish alternative systems for dealing with the problems that underlie the conflict. So, ibig sabihin, paano natin i-deliver yung ating mga projects and activities na hindi tayo nakakasama, no? We don't do more harm than good that we intend to do. So, it started based on the observation na indeed, yung aid sometimes, regardless of their intention, they tend to contribute to conflict dynamics in the context in which it was implemented. So inobserve nila to, they studied aid interventions in many countries all over the world, and they say many of these interventions, many of these development programs actually help exacerbate the conflicts in the community instead of helping the community. So marami dito ang mas nakasama kaysa mas nakatulong. So that's why nabuo, they, out of these case studies, the group was able to identify lessons for the future peace builders and for the future peace and development practitioners. But by definition, do no harm is, next slide please, is an approach that examines how, as again, an intervention contributes to the escalation of conflicts or tensions in the community or vice versa, and how it enhances unity and social cohesion among the people. So we do have a framework for analyzing the impact of aid and intervention in the context. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the framework. Next slide. Yes. So that is the framework. It may look like mukha siyang so many things are happening, pero iisa-isahin po natin ito. Itong framework na ito, nabuo po ito out of the 6 lessons in doing no harm when we bring in interventions projects to conflict affected and conflict vulnerable areas. So let's start with the first lesson. Okay, lesson number 1. Remember that when an intervention of any kind, kahit anong intervention pa yan, relief operations, pagbibigay ng scholarship program, pagmamount ng literacy program for adults and kids, or putting up like an infrastructure project, any intervention of any kind, when that enters a context, it becomes part of that context. So next slide, please. So remember, when an intervention enters the context, sabi natin, it becomes part of that context. Sometimes, next up, go back. Sometimes this is not always obvious to the outsiders who feel that they or their activities are not related to overarching issues in the context. So minsan sabi natin, wala naman akong kinalaman sa warring parties dyan sa lugar na yan. Andito lang po ako para magdala ng relief goods para sa ating mga kababayan. No? Sometimes yun yung ating thinking. However, becoming part of the context, that's unavoidable, no? Because whether we like it or not, we will begin to have effects doon sa community kung saan natin dinadala yung proyekto natin, even beyond what we intend to do, no? So how do we address now those unintended effects? So halimbawa, next slide please. This is just a parang a presentation, no, of how sometimes we become, no, our interventions become a part of the context. So from an outsider's point of view, the community looks very normal, no? Ayan lang, it's a multicultural community. You have residents there who are indigenous peoples, for instance, or Moros or Muslim Filipinos, and we do have Christian settlers. Say this, for instance, if this is like in a Mindanao context, no? Okay. However, sometimes what we do not realize or what is not visible to us, no, as outsiders of the community is the dynamics, the relationship. Next. All right. Sometimes what is not visible to us or what is not known to us is the relationship of these groups of people in the community. Tingin natin parang okay lang, pero if we dig deeper pala, if we try to understand more what is happening, minsan we realize, no, meron palang hindi magandang pag-relationship, no, yung mga IP sa lugar na yan and the Christian settlers, or meron hindi magandang relationship with the three groups in that part. And then we bring in our project next. Ayan, so we bring in our project. Now, our project, itong ano na to, this Poso water system, now it becomes part of the community kasi nasa loob na siya eh. No? There are groups of people na nagkaroon ng better access to water because of your water system. So that would somehow change the dynamics, no, ng lugar. Later, we would understand this better. Next slide, please. Second lesson, sabi natin kanina, when we enter, no, when our projects enter any kind of context, it becomes part of that. And also that every context is characterized by two sets of factors, the dividers and the connectors. Ano-ano po ba itong mga dividers and connectors? Next slide. So yan. So second, no, dividers, these are factors that create division or tension among people or groups. They tend to somehow push people apart, no? On the other hand, connectors naman, these are factors that bring people and groups together, you know? These are found, and these two, etong dividers and connectors, they are found in every context. Remember, even in the most peaceful communities or in the most peaceful context, we find dividers. And even also in the most violent communities or conflicts, we find connectors. Meron yan, no? We just need to look into it and we just need to understand the community better. But, what ang kailangan nating iwasan is that dividers and connectors are not necessarily people. So, minsan kasi pag sinabi nating dividers and connectors, ang sasabihin agad natin, si mayor kasi yan, kasi corrupt, or si kapitan yan kasi incompetent, no? But sometimes, no, these are not the people per se. Next slide. Because dividers and connectors are systems and institutions, attitudes and actions, values and interests, experiences, symbols and occasions, no? By systems and institutions, we mean ito yung mga formal structure natin, institutional policies, local organizations, kasama dyan yung mga NGOs present, CSOs, businesses, local governments that have a key role in local conflict. Example, yung police station sa community, no, posibleng may key role yon in local peace and conflict. Yung daycare program for children, mga ganon. A system for water distribution, for instance, no, yung sistema ng pag-distribute ng water that can become a divider and a connector. attitudes and actions naman, of course, no, these refer to predispositions and behavioral patterns of community members. Halimbawa dito, are the communities hostile to foreigners or to outsiders? Are there traditions and beliefs that, tend to divide people apart or bring people in closer? Are there parenting patterns, no, that are violent to children? Or are there parenting patterns that are more progressive, no, that support the holistic development of children in the area? No, what are the hobbies of young people? Mga ganon. Values and interests naman, of course, these refer to point of views, no, about the appreciation or importance of one thing over the other. So, eto yung authority in the family, conflicts related to a resource that is scarce, competition for job opportunities. And of course, experiences, no, these are situations that built a reference scheme for the community, no. Halimbawa, people who have survived a baha or an earthquake, no, people with experience in the army or people who lived out of the country. Sometimes these experiences, no, common experiences of people can serve as a divider or a connector. Halimbawa, for those people who suffered, who as a community, no, suffered a what do you call that? Say a flood, no, a very devastating flood. So po pwedeng maging connector yon for the people to gather together and come up with systems para ma-prevent, no, yung negative impact of disasters in the future. And symbols, of course, yung artistic and historic representations of identity, history of different sides of conflict. So halimbawa dito yung ating mga traditions, no, or sometimes even yung mga natural resources natin that may represent conflict, no, like yung mga rivers minsan, they may represent conflict because they represent they become source sometimes of resource conflict in the community. So remember, no, dividers and connectors are not people per se. No? These are systems, attitudes, values, and interests, experiences, symbols, and occasions that may or may not affect, no, how people act and how people tend to behave. Okay, next. Please let me know, no, if I'm speaking too fast or if you're not getting what I'm saying. Okay, so third lesson, sabi natin kanina, every context it's characterized by two sets of factors. Always there's a divider and always there are dividers and there are connectors. Third lesson in do no harm is that any intervention will interact with both dividers and connection and connectors. The next slide. So yon, intervention, it will interact both in the dividers and connectors, no? So your intervention can have a negative impact, increasing tension among people or decreasing and weakening connectors. Or it can also have a positive impact by minimizing divisions and increasing the connections among people. So all organizations intervening in complex context or yung mga konteksto na communities na merong conflict, no, of course, we all hope to have positive impact. So these lessons in do no harm help us to be more aware, no, or is telling us to be more aware of the unintended impacts of our interventions to both dividers and connectors, which can undermine the positive goals we set for ourselves. Because sometimes, no, our intentions are very, very good. So we bring in a water system. Nag-ambag-ambag tayo para makapagpatayo ng water system sa isang community. But because we are not careful enough, no, or we are not aware of the unintended impacts, posibleng yung water system natin, nakapag-increase nga siya ng access to water, pero nagdala naman siya ng away or gulo sa isang lugar kasi nag-aaway yung mga tao dahil pinag-agawan yung resource na binigay natin. So we need to think of other impacts, no, that we bring into the community. Okay. Fourth lesson. But how do we know? How do we know kung ano yung impact ng ating interventions, no, sa dividers and connectors? Sabi sa do no harm, there are predictable patterns no, na pwede nating balikan or pwede nating tignan by which our intervention interacts with the conflict. This is based on the lessons learned no, by aid workers and development practitioners all over the world when they implemented some of their projects. Next slide. Interventions interact with dividers and connectors through, number one, go back please, organizational actions, and second, through the behavior of the staff. So remember, there are patterns of impact no, that fall into like two categories. Ito yun yung actions. So actions, organizational actions, basically, this is what organizations do. What we do, how we transmit our goods and services, and what kind of goods and services do we transmit. Yung behaviors naman, this is what individuals know, no? How we interact with each other, other organizations, and the local people, no? The local community. So these common patterns of impact, no? Remember that organizations, we bring resources of some sort into the context, and these resources, no, that we bring in will result to positive or negative results depending on these two patterns of impact, what we do and how we interact with the local actors in the community and the other actors that are present in the context where we operate. Okay, next slide, please. So, ano-ano ba yung mga patterns of impact or yung mga resource transfer effects na sinasabi natin kanina? Kanina yung actions, remember the organizational actions, what organizations do, how we transfer goods and services, and what we transmit. It can have a resource transfer effect to the community where we work. No? So what are these resource transfer effects? So we do have first is theft. We do have we can bring in market effects. There's distribution effects, there's substitution effects, and legitimization effects. So ano ba itong mga resource transfer effects ito, no? First is theft. So sometimes, no, when we this happens when resources that are intended for distribution or payment may be stolen or used by fighters or used in other means, no, that are not intended for the project. Halimbawa, sometimes, no, when we bring in resources from outside, no, pera ba yan or materials man yan, no, if we are not careful and if these resources ay napasa kamay siya nung mga actors in the community, violent actors in the community, yung resources na dinala natin na sana we intend these resources, no, na makatulong, they ended up being in the wrong hands, so nagamit. Pwede siyang magamit to feed into the violent conflict that is happening. Pwede siyang magamit or manakaw ng mga fighters, pwede siyang magamit or manakaw ng mga say corrupt individuals in the community. So instead of nakatulong tayo doon sa bad actors, kumbaga doon sa mga corrupt actors, sa mga thieves. Kasi we were not careful with our resources, no, sa pagdadala. Second, we can also, our aid, no, or our intervention also bring in market effects. Ano po ba itong mga market effects, no? Remember that our aid, our project, we affect the markets by reinforcing either the war economy or the peace economy. How does this happen? Halimbawa, papasok tayo sa isang community that is a fishing village or a farming village na lang, no? A farming village na yun yung main source of income ng karamihan sa mga nakatira doon sa community. Tapos magdadala tayo ng mga bigas, say for example, magre-relief tayo doon, relief operations. So as part of our relief operations or our, I don't know, Christmas party ba yan, magdadala tayong pagkain doon. Bibili tayo ng rice from the outside kasi yun lang yung allowed ng ating finance, for instance, no, if your finance are very strict. So we will bring in those goods in the community. And we give them away for free, of course, kasi ano yun, aid natin yun, no? So, on the outside, mukhang okay, very good. Namigay tayo ng bigas doon, no? Nagtambak tayo ng napakaraming bigas and we gave them away for free. Good. Nagkaroon ng access to food yung mga tao. However, posibleng may resource transfer effect yan doon sa local market economy. Kasi baka yung mga nagbebenta ng bigas doon, wala na silang customers, wala na silang maibenta because the resources that you brought in have competed with the local economy. So others are saying if we really want to help the community, it's better that we source our projects, no, or yung materials natin or our aid, if they are available locally, it's better that if we source them locally. Kasi nakatulong ka na doon sa mga nagbebenta, at the same time, you're also providing aid doon sa those who cannot afford. No? So you avoid competition, you avoid feeding into the conflict kasi baka mag-away-away yung community, no? Kasi sumama yung loob dahil wala na silang pangkabuhayan just because you brought in sacks and sacks of bigas or rice. Third is the distribution effect, no? Remember that the distributional impact of our interventions, our aid, they affect the intergroup relationships, no? Either we feed the tensions or we reinforce the connections. How does that happen? If we are not very careful with how we distribute our aid, if we are not very careful with how we identify our beneficiaries, no, pag hindi masyadong justified yung identification ng beneficiaries, posibleng magkaroon yan ng impact doon sa intergroup relations kasi maaring may ibang grupo na hindi natin na-cater, hindi natin nabigyan, magagalit sila ngayon doon sa grupo ng mga tao na nabigyan natin, na na-cater natin. And it's not their fault, no? It's not the fault of our beneficiaries na sila yung napili. But they might end up being becoming the receiving party ng hatred or ng galit ng mga kasama nila, ng mga kapitbahay nila, no? Dahil lang sila nakatanggap, yung iba hindi nakatanggap. So I'm sure that that's also one of the more common patterns, no, that we see sometimes when we bring in aid. Nagkakagulo yung mga tao kasi hindi maayos minsan yung mga bagay-bagay. Hindi maayos yung sistema natin, how we distribute, how we bring in the resources that we want to bring in. And the next one is yung substitution effects. Ano ba itong substitution effects? No, this occurs when organizations substitute for the role of the government, take over, reduce, or replace the local efforts. Minsan tayo, if we're outside the government, no, as members of the academe or sometimes as members of non-government organizations or civil society organizations, pag tingin natin na parang medyo incompetent yung barangay or yung local government ng isang lugar na gusto nating tulungan, and minsan meron tayo ng parang parang savior complex, no? We think we could save the whole community. We think we could do it on our own. So papasok tayo doon, we take over the roles of the government. Sabihin natin dahil nababagalan tayo kay Kap, diyan ka na muna. Kami na to, kaya na namin to, we'll take over, we will respond dito sa crisis na nangyayari ng barangay. So, nangyayari sometimes, our intention is good because we want to deliver the services as fast as we can and as efficiently as we can, no? But, yung effect naman nun ng resource transfer na yon sa community natin is we might have inadvertently, again, weakened the local systems and processes. It's either, baka nawalan na ng kapasidad ngayon yung local government or local authorities to respond to disasters or to respond to conflicts, to respond to crises, kasi feeling nila anytime there's crisis, someone will come in, no, to take over our role. So baka hindi empowering yung ating approach kapag gano'n, no, na papasok tayo, we take over the role of the government. So maganda na pagpapasok tayo sa isang community, clarified, no, klaro kung who will do what, when, and where, and how they will do it, no. At klaro dapat yung sistema, na in place dapat yung sistema, at dapat, and sana, instead of taking over the role of the local authorities, we just find a way to empower them. Para in that way, that's also more sustainable. Kasi tayo, the outsiders, we're not gonna be there forever. Aalis tayo after the crisis. And when we leave, magka-create yan ng vacuum sa community. And unfortunately, sometimes, no, when we leave, nagkakagulo yung community kasi wala na yung parang inaasahan nila. Kasi nga, hindi natin na-empower or natanggalan natin ng role yung local institution because of our eagerness nga to help, no, sometimes. And lastly, ito naman yung legitimization effect. So, our intervention will legitimize people, their action of agenda, no? Support or action or agenda supporting either the pursuit of violent conflicts or peace. Sometimes, pagpapasok tayo doon, no, if we're not hindi natin inaral, we did not do our homework. Hindi natin inaral yung konteksto ng lugar na ating pupuntahan. Hindi natin minap out yung mga actors. Sino-sino ba ang mga actors sa community na ito? Who are these actors? What are the relationships between and among these actors? And what kind of interest and agenda they represent? If we don't do that, no, minsan, there are actors whose interest and agenda hindi align minsan sa ating objective, or yung interest and agenda are more aligned towards violence, no? So nangyayari, if we engage these actors, our mere presence there, no, our mere act of engagement already legitimizes them and whatever it is that they represent. Kahit yung simpleng picture taking lang with an official that is known to be a corrupt official in the community, that could legitimize or their interest. Kasi pwede niyang sabihin, oh, yung mga taga-Ateneo Dinaga nga sa akin nagko-coordinate eh. Ibig sabihin, legit yung aking mga interest. Legit itong aking mga whatever it is that person is representing, no, in the community. Kasi tayo as outsiders, kasi we do have a certain level of reputation, no? Madalas yung mga outsiders, especially pag meron tayong magandang reputasyon, when we engage with bad actors in the community, nalilegitimize natin yung kanilang interest and their agenda. And the last thing that we want to do, especially in conflict affected and conflict vulnerable areas, is we legitimize bad actors or delegitimize good actors. Kasi these are sensitive and complex settings. So whatever we do, pwedeng mag-ignite ng violent conflict. Okay. Next. Okay, again, sabi natin kanina, those are for patterns of action, no? Second is how we, as an organization, no, how we interact with each other, with other organizations, and with other people. It has also some patterns of impact, no? May impact din po yun sa community na where we operate, no? And these patterns of impact sometimes are manifested in four behavior patterns: yung respect, accountability, fairness, and transparency. Next slide, please. So when we do, pag pumapasok tayo sa community, when we engage with respectful interactions, no, with the local people, no, those respectful interactions, they're calm. When we are being collaborative, we are trusting, we are sensitive to the local concerns. So that brings in positive patterns of behavior. On the negative patterns of behavior naman, yun yung when we conduct ourselves in a disrespectful manner, no? So this is manifested through suspicion, our indifference, our belligerence, or when we are being dismissive, no, of the community. Sometimes papasok tayo nun, we feel like we already know, no, what's their problem. Minsan kapag outsiders tayo, pupunta tayo sa isang community, we tell them what their problem is, and then we tell them how to solve their problems. So medyo hindi maganda yon, kasi most of the time, or more often than not, the community, because they've lived there all their lives, they are the ones who experience their problem. They knew their problems better, and they knew how to solve them better than we do. So part of being respectful is acknowledging, that those people really know better than us, and we need to listen to them, in order for our programs and interventions to be more responsive to their needs. On accountability, organizations and personnel and staff, we display accountability for our actions and decisions by one, taking action rather than displaying powerlessness, by taking responsibility for the errors. Kung may nagawa tayong pagkakamali sa community, we take responsibility rather than displaying impunity na, we're from the academic sector, where we are seldom wrong, you cannot hold us accountable, for instance, by abiding by the rule of law rather than relying on arms, or to display power rather than relying power over the community. However, accountability here also refers to local people, responsiveness to local concerns, as mentioned kanina. So if we refuse to accept responsibility for our errors, we do not take action when action is required, the local community, they will lose trust in us. They will lose trust in the organization as a whole, and the capability of the organization to respond to their needs. Remember, when we go there, we do not bring in our individual selves. We bring in the name of our organizations and whatever our organizations represent. So say you bring in the name of Ateneo de Naga, or as an Atenean, for instance. Fairness, patterns of behavior that are fair. We recognize the value of input of all members of the community rather than assigning, say, different value to different lives, and they're responsive to the expressed needs and goals of the entire area, not only those with voice and power or influence. So meaning we listen to the voices of everyone. We make sure that no one is left behind, or no one is pushed to the margins. We must understand the local, contextual, and historical definitions of fair treatment and distribution in order to determine what equitable distribution or access looks like for the community. Because sometimes our definition of fairness may not be the same definition of fairness with the community. So we need to weigh that. We need to balance these things para we do not bring in more harm than good. And lastly, of course, in transparency, this is the pattern of behavior that cuts across all patterns of behavior. So being clear, this means being clear and open about an intervention, about what our aim is, what our objective is. This means inviting local people to participate in the process. Hindi yung pupunta tayo doon, buo na yung proyekto natin, and we just tell them what to do, but we ask them what they need and how we can better respond to those needs. And feedback. I'm very happy that many of you actually kanina dun sa word cloud natin, marami have identified process-based indicators of success in projects. So feedback is very important. What else? Feedback, sharing the concern, sharing the concerns of the community, also reinforcing the positive patterns of behavior. So let's try not to be, if we receive criticisms on our intervention and our project, let us try not to be defensive and not shield our projects from critique from the community, because this leads to a perception that the organization, or we, as a group of, aid workers, do not respect or trust the local people and is not willing to be held accountable for our actions. Okay, next slide. Ayan, malapit na po tayo matapos. Nasa 5th lesson na po tayo. The 5th lesson for do no harm is that the details of an intervention matter. What does this mean? Next slide. This means that we need to identify yung 5 W's and 1 H ng ating intervention. The who, what, where, when, how, and why. Next slide. Remember that an intervention as a whole is a series of choices. The entire project na gagawin ninyo sa community, it's it's rarely a source of negative impact, no, not the entire project. Rather, those seemingly small or seemingly unimportant details and are where the patterns of impact are generated. No, we have observed that if an intervention, minsan no, pag ang intervention has an unintended negative impact to the community, it does not have to change the whole intervention or the whole project, no? Even most of its activity. It can adjust some of these minor yet critical details, no? Ano-ano ba itong mga key programming details that we need to be mindful of? Yung 5 W's and 1 H natin. Number 1, who? Who are you working with? Sino? If you are an organization, sino yung staff? No? Or if you're a professional organization, sino yung staff? Or sino yung mga volunteers that we engage? Who are the people that we engage, no, to work on the project? Sino yung mga beneficiaries? Sino yung mga partners natin that we are engaging and what are the interests and agenda that they represent? And who are the authorities that we are also engaging? Second, what are you doing, no? Ibig sabihin, ano ba yung project mo? What kind of project that is, no? Ano ba siya? Does it respond to the need of the community, felt need of the community, or is this a project that you do because this is something that's easier for you to implement, no? Where are you working, no? Saan yung location? When is your intervention taking place? Even that time lang. For instance, halimbawa, pupunta tayo sa isang community, sasabihin natin, i-implement tayo ng isang, say, adult literacy program in a farming community. Yung adult literacy program natin, because say convenient for us is umaga, no? Convenient for us is in the morning kasi yun yung mag-fit ng schedule natin. However, that's convenient for us, but that may not be convenient for our intended beneficiaries kasi baka in the morning they should be in their farm, no? That's their time na nagfa-farming sila, they try to earn a living for that day. And when we insist that we do it in the morning because that's what convenient for us, project implementers, nagawa nga natin yung ating program, no? Na kapag nakaturo tayo how to read and write, no, sa isang community, or may nakapagturo tayo ng say financial literacy sa isang community, but yung another side naman nun is they lost their income for that day. So we also need to think of those things, no? Like whose interest do we do we consider, no? So even those small details of when are we going to do our project, what time, that's very crucial, no, on whether or not our activities will bring in good results or bad results. Why and how, no? Why and how these are cross-cutting elements to all of the above programming pieces, no? So remember, when we ask ourselves what project am I gonna implement in this barangay, dapat kasunod niyan, why that and why not something else? Bakit ito? Bakit ito yung project ko? And we keep asking why and why not something else. And then we tend to also parang dig deeper, no, on the real reason why we want to implement that project. And importantly, how am I gonna do this, no? Balik na naman tayo doon sa who are we engaging, who are the beneficiaries, saan, kailan, and those little things. So remember, it's not the whole project per se, no? Minsan, it's not the whole project, yung literacy program, for instance, na dadalhin natin sa isang community. It's not the whole literacy program per se na nag-cause na some of the farmers lost their 1 day's worth of income. It's just the timing of that literacy activity that we conducted. So if we conducted it in a siguro later time, then that would have been better. Okay, next. Remember, okay, no? So programs are made up of a series of decisions. Some of these decisions are large, some are seemingly small. But the small details of well-designed and well-intended programs, no, if overlooked, can cause negative impact. Sabi nga nila, the devil daw is always on the details. So always remember that. So halimbawa, ito, let's go back to our community, yung tri-people community natin with conflict affected, no, na binigyan natin ng water system. Next slide, please. Okay, halimbawa, ito yung tri-people community natin. Next. Ayan. So, the mere location of this water system, no, could actually make or break, or could define whether or not we bring in positive result next or negative results. So if we put it somewhere in the middle, somewhere more accessible to more people, then probably we would minimize the resource conflict that might arise out of the water system project that we implemented in the community. So simple location lang, not the water system per se, no, but just the location that we changed, that that could really already make a difference. But of course, next slide. Sorry. So of course, we're also not oblivious to some constraints, that there are constraints on what any organization can do, which cannot be changed or adapted by any individual in the short term. Halimbawa, ano yung mandate natin? Ano yung objectives ng organization natin? Where do our money come from? No? Sino-sino yung mga donors and funding natin? What are the preference of our donors and funding? So merong mga ganong consideration, no? And these constraints affect or determine the criteria for the decisions we make. And of course, we're not oblivious to that. However, the sixth lesson for do no harm, next slide, please. Remember, there are always options. So we give them options, and lots of options. So maraming options. We just need to look into those options. Next slide. Remember, we can always, yes. Okay, yeah. Remember, you can always do things differently than how you are doing them currently, Can always learn and improve. See if you are having a negative impact, make adjustments, on the critical details. Sometimes hindi naman yung buong programa or yung project yung kailangang baguhin, just some details, And if you see you are having a positive impact, sustain it, capitalize on that, what you are doing, and build upon it. And if you can, maybe replicate it to other areas as well, So these are the basic lessons of do no harm and the framework that they create. This framework, etong pinakita natin, next. Yan. Okay. There are always options if we're seeing na medyo we're having a negative impact na, it's welcome to redesign in the middle of the project. Yung ating mga project and activity, those are not set in stone, If nakakasama na tayo, redesign. If nakakabuti tayo, build on it, capitalize on that. So this framework can help us analyze our own work and understand the relationship between what we do and the context in where we operate, and make sure we do no harm, meaning we do not exacerbate existing conflict, minimize negative impact, and if possible, maximize positive impact. All right. Sige, please let me know if I'm running out of time already. Okay, the next part of this session naman, so kanina tinignan natin yung do no harm, Related to do no harm is the more practical, more operational lens, which is the peace and conflict impact assessment. Kung yung do no harm is a framework, kumbaga it's an approach, it's a lens. Etong PCIA naman is more of a tool siya. Okay, next. Hindi pala yung lessons learned. But what is a peace and conflict impact assessment? It's a means of anticipating, monitoring, and evaluating the ways in which an intervention may affect or has affected the dynamics of peace and conflict in a conflict-affected or conflict-vulnerable area. It must be integrated, remember, if you want our interventions to be conflict-sensitive and peace-promoting, PCIA must be integrated in every stage of the project cycle. So ano nga yung mga stages of the project cycle? So we have the planning stage, development, programming, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So it will help us ensure that our activities, our projects that we are working on do not aggravate violent conflict as far as possible, and as far as possible, contribute to building peace within and between communities. So in order to, next slide, in order to identify and understand the peace and conflict impact of our interventions, we need to ask two basic questions lang naman. No? Ask questions that are different from the ones that are usually getting asked about the impact of initiatives. No? Kasi minsan, kapag when we implement projects, the questions that we ask are how many people will have access to water? How many people will, how many adults, no, illiterate adults will learn how to read and write? Or how many kids were we able to reach out to? Ilan yung nakapag-benefit? Ilan yung nabigyan natin ng tablets to for the, what do you call that? New normal education, kumbaga. So, number one, ask ourselves, but for PCIA, more than that, no, aside from those questions, we need to know more than just the number of beneficiaries and ask ourselves, what are the potential conflict creating impact of our project and our initiative? And second, what are the potential peace creating impact of our project and our initiatives? So the key here is the key here is to reduce the conflict creating impact, and next, increase naman, no, or support yung potential peace creating impact of our project and reinforce peace building impacts, kumbaga. Next slide. Okay, what are those conflict creating impacts na sinasabi natin? No? If our project has good results, paano siya nagkakaroon ng conflict creating impact? These are structures and processes that increase the probability that violent methods will be used, no, to address conflict, or processes that increase the chances, no, that conflict will be dealt with through the use of violence. Yung peace building impact naman, these are structure processes that strengthen the prospects for intergroup peace and decrease the likelihood of the outbreak, escalation, recurrence, or continuation of violent conflict. Next slide. So halimbawa, balik na naman po tayo next. Balik na naman po tayo doon sa ating project, no? Doon sa water system in a tri-people community that is not very peaceful. So this is just an illustration of how an intervention could bring about peace building or conflict creating impact, no? So doing PCIA, it begs the question on how might or has the water system initiative next create conflict or build peace directly or indirectly, and what changes might be made to ensure the sustainable positive impact and minimize negative impact. Halimbawa, sa ganito, no, in a water project in a conflict-prone setting, next, if we look at development indicators, ang titingnan lang natin or measure natin for success or failure is just the increased access, no, to clean water. Okay. However, if we looked at the peace and conflict impacts, we will also look into yung indicators such as, next slide, and next please. Yes, such as the number of conflicts na nangyari over water distribution. Ilang beses nag-away itong community dahil over the system of distribution of water. Or also we can look at, say next, number of cooperative relationship between residents of different ethnic groups, for instance, or increased levels of involvement in joint management of the project. So these are not development indicators, no, mas relationship focused siya. But this can define the success and failure of our project in conflict affected area. So titingnan natin, dahil ba doon sa water system natin, employ ba tayo ng yung bawasa? I don't know if you're familiar. Nag-organize ba tayo ng, say, Barangay Water System Association na represented yung lahat ng ethnic group? And because of that, naging daan siya for these groups of people to actually be together, implement a project together, and, know each other better, and break yung mga previous stereotypes nila posible no against each other. So those are the things that we can look into kapag ginawa natin yung peace and conflict impact assessment. Next slide. In doing PCIA, we look into 7 impact areas. Ito yung 7 impact areas for PCIA. We looked at yung conflict management capacities, no? So we ask ourselves, what is our program, activity, or project doing to enhance the capacity of the local population to manage conflicts in non-violent ways? So do we strengthen yung conflict management mechanism that is existing in the community, or kung wala man, do we help no in setting up systems for conflict management? Second naman yung on armed violence and human security. How has our intervention project, program, or activity influenced the patterns and levels of armed violence in the area? So dahil ba sa dala nating proyekto dumami, no, nagkagulo, tumaas yung level ng armed violence sa area kasi nag-away-away sa resources. And then third is on political structure and processes. We ask ourselves, how has our program contributed to the enhancement of the presence and capacities of local government officials, for instance, in addressing human security needs of their constituents or increasing their conflict management capacities. So, nandun ba tayo? Meron ba tayong substitution effect dahil we took over the role of the barangay, or did we try to empower the barangay officials in the area with I don't know, like good governance? Nagturo ba tayo ng good governance as a parang tawag niyan, kumbaga ba, freebie ng ating as a component of our project, no? And fourth is on economic structure and processes. We ask ourselves, how has our project contributed to the equitable distribution and use of resources for the productivity and economic development of the area? Or paano ba yung project natin nag-contribute to the conversion of war-based economy and employment? So nakapagbigay ba tayo ng economic opportunity in a way that people stop engaging in violence because they have more peaceful and more productive means of living? So tingnan din natin yun, no? And then, of course, on social empowerment, it's important, no, na we ask ourselves, Yes, it's important that we ask ourselves, how are we able to contribute to increasing the capacity of people and the local community to live and work together based on values that promotes cohesion, values that promote empowerment, and how has our program contributed to the promotion of culture of peace, or yung kultura ng kapayapaan? Sixth is the environment, we ask ourselves, it refers to, of course, the state of natural resources and how our project and yung effect ng ating project are supporting the conservation, use, and management of environmental resources. Nakadagdag ba tayo? Nakasama ba tayo sa local state of the local environment, or nakatulong ba tayo, no? So yung water system ba natin ay nakatulong or nakasama sa environmental state ng isang lugar? And lastly, on gender, it refers to the effect of our project, our activity, both on women and men in terms of their gender roles and how they are being affected by or benefiting from peace or conflict. Marami sa aming mga sessions na ginawa namin sa mga conflict affected and conflict vulnerable areas. Marami sa feedback na aming natatanggap. Minsan, yung mga infrastructure project, sometimes they are not dahil nga hindi madalas nai-engage ang mga kababaihan sa community in terms of identifying what kind of projects should be implemented. These projects do not tend to serve the needs or respond to the needs of women in the community. Halimbawa, yung pagpapatayo ng mga housing projects, yung cupboard sobrang matataas. Most of the time, sino ba yung yung local community, madalas yung mga kababaihan, they assume the role, no, yung domestic role nila doon sa bahay, at sila madalas yung nasa kusina. Pero we constructed yung ating yung cupboard sa kusina na masyadong mataas, no, not considering generally the height of most women. Of course, we're not saying that women should only be, no, at home, because that is not true. But what we're saying is that when we implement projects, tingnan natin yung epekto niya both on women and men at sa current na roles na ginagawa ng men and women in the community. That way, we can be more responsive, no, at more relevant yung project or yung activity na ginagawa natin or ini-introduce natin sa mga areas where we intend to work. So once again, if you want to assess the peace and conflict impact of our projects, we can look into these 7 areas: conflict management capacities, armed violence and human security, political structures and processes, economic structures and processes, social empowerment, environment, and gender. Okay, and I think that is the last slide. Yes. So that ends my session for this afternoon. Maraming salamat po, and I hope you're able to get something out of it. And I'd be happy to hear questions from our participants.
Thank you so much to our speaker, Director May. That was quite an insightful and empowering talk. I really personally learned a lot and will sure be mindful of the 6 lessons of the do no harm, especially in implementing projects and community interventions. At this point, we will move on to the open forum. We encourage everyone to share their messages and questions for our speakers. You can click the raise hand button and wait for your name to be called. You can also send your questions in the Zoom chat or the YouTube comment section, and I will be reading them for you. While you are still thinking about your questions or insights, let us have our first reactor for today's webinar. Our first reactor is Ms. Lourdes Stephanie Enriquez. Ms. Lourdes, are you here po?
Yes, hello, good afternoon po. Good afternoon po, Director May. So, I have a question po, and lang po, disclaimer, medyo nirelate ko po kasi in political context, since our votes for the presidential candidate is very essential in many different aspects, and one of it is the resource transfer effect that you have mentioned po kanina, and that may be affected either positively or negatively, which means will also affect directly din po our future programs and projects related to peace, and that conflict sensitivity serves not only to decrease the potential for harm, but also increase the effectiveness of assistance or support. So, Director May po, as a peace advocate po, and as part of a peace building initiative, what particular tips or key considerations would you like us as Filipinos to consider on how we can contribute to ensuring the best presidential candidate of our country, so that peace and conflict sensitivity projects and programs can be further practiced and preserved po?
Yes, thank you very much. No, that's very timely, and I'm glad that you asked us. I think ngayon the youth actually already composed na one of the bigger chunk of the voting population. So the youth has the power to actually, if we just go out there and vote, we have the power to chart the future of our country. So in terms naman of choosing the candidate, I would really recommend that unang-una, aralin natin yung mga tumatakbo. So let's treat them as applicants, no? Kumbaga sa posisyon na tinatakbuhan nila. Aralin natin, let us look at the values that they represent. Let us look at their platforms. Let us look at their track record, kung meron, no? Tingnan natin let us also look at the stance, their stance on crucial issues in the past, no? In issues that are relevant to us as as youth, relevant to us as residents in the country. So tingnan natin yung kanilang mga stance on various issues, and most of the time yung mga stance nila would actually kumbaga ba, they would represent their values, no? And that will give us somehow a sneak peek of what kind of government we will have if these leaders these people will be leading us. So I really encourage you, no, na parang andin yan parang it's like when we do our project. When we do our project, we make sure that we do our homework. Kumbaga, we looked into the details, pinag-aaralan natin, we try to understand the context where we implement our project. So it's the same, no, when we are choosing our leaders. Pag-aralan din natin mabuti. Tingnan natin if their values align to our values, their principles align to our principles. Tingnan natin yung mga past engagements nila, yung track record nila, and how have they been doing in the past, no? So that will give us an idea of how they will conduct themselves in the future. So let's try not to kumbaga ba, wag mabulag. There's a lot of noise going on, but focus on what's really important. And please, when you research on the candidates, please look mag-research po tayo doon sa mga sites that are that are reliable, no? Those reliable sites. Wag naman puro Facebook and TikTok and all those kinds of. I'm not saying that they're not reliable, no. There are really good stuff that we can find from those platforms, but we need to take these messages with a grain of salt. And that's actually that's part of us being responsible citizens also of the country.
Oh, yes po, indeed. Thank you so much po, Director May.
Thank you so much to our first reactor. That was Miss Lourdes Stephanie Enriquez. And now for the second reactor, we have Miss Maria Bel Faye Merano.
Good afternoon, ma'am. My most profound appreciation to you, Director May Ballena, for your insightful talk regarding do not harm, conflict sensitivity, and peace promotion. It is indeed relevant in today's generation, especially that wars and conflicts are still at the corner. So looking at the context that was shared last Masterpiece 4, which was organized by your respective office, I was able to empathize with our dear brothers and sisters, especially in the Mindanao, on how transitional justice crosses from the past until the present. So this connects to how we should implement initiatives in conflict areas that should look beyond the success indicators. So throughout your talk, you have emphasized the approach of conflict sensitivity, understanding the context and intervention on these specific locations in a more propositive lens on how we do projects. So this portrays to digging deeper into the relationships of the groups, apprehending the dividers, connectors, and intervention by measuring the actions and behavior as an impact to the community, especially in the areas of the assessment. So we should also be aware of the substitute and legitimization effects, weakening the local government or leaders to talk about their responsibility and discussion on their self-interest and agendas. My question is, how do we maintain the balance between not romanticizing the idea of extending support to the community's needs while achieving a good relationship with the organization objectives?
Sorry. Well, always remember, no, minsan kasi when we bring in goods to the community, let us try to situate ourselves better in a way na we are not the saviors of the community. We are there, no, more often than not, we need them more than they need us, actually. So we're there because we want to help, but that doesn't mean na kumbaga ba, we're the savior and they are the ones who need saving, no? It's very important that we look at the community where we work with. We look at the people as partners and not only as beneficiaries. So they are our partners, meaning we look at them equally. No? They are our equals, and because they are the resource persons, kumbaga, they know their problems better. They know the solutions to their problems better than we do. So marami siguro tayong inaral, no? There are development theories that we have learned in the past, but those development theories, kumbaga, they will not amount to anything if they do not respond to the felt and real needs of the community. And the only way where we get that is from them. So we treat them as partners, as equals, and that's the only way we can deliver, or we can bring in effective effective interventions na hindi naman, that do not look them as mere beneficiaries, because they are not beneficiaries. No? They are partners. No, it just so happened that they are in a they maybe are put in a precarious situation of no, which is also not their fault. No, nagkataon na nandun sila, at nagkataon that we are in a better position to actually extend assistance. That's just it. But in terms of implementing projects, they are our partners. So dapat klaro sa atin yon when we work with them.
Got it, ma'am. Thank you po.
Thank you so much to our wonderful reactors. Now let us hear from our audience. That was actually Maria Bel Femerano. Thank you so much, Maria Bel. So at this point, let us now hear from our audience. We have our first question here, and the question, ma'am, is actually from an anonymous sender. So the question is the feud between local politicians or between supporters of these politicians part of the conflict that we need to understand in doing projects in a certain locality where the said dynamics happen? Ulitin ko po, or okay na po, ma'am?
Yeah, definitely, no, definitely. Yun yung sinasabi natin na when we pag pumapasok tayo sa isang community, we need to understand the actors and the relationship of the actors. And the local politicians are very, they're crucial peace and conflict actors. But because madalas, the feud between these politicians are actually the ones causing the feud also within the community. So we need to have a good grasp of what is happening. What are the agenda and the interest of these actors, and how would these affect our program, or how our program would affect the existing feud, no? Kung makakatulong ba siya, makakasama ba siya. So when we choose, for instance, beneficiaries ng ating project, we be careful, no, na hindi puro supporters ni politician A yung ating i-engage, because we will be legitimizing politician A regardless of the interest that politician represents, no? Or we will be encouraging yung inggit from other groups of people. So it's very important that we understand these things. We understand what the leaders represent, and we understand what their impact to the relationship of the people and their eventual impact on our projects.
Thank you, Director May. So, napaka-importante po talaga na i-consider rin po natin yung mga political actors sa isang community with regards to considering implementing projects. And yun na rin po, pagiging aware sa conflict rin na nangyayari between these politicians.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Director May. We have a comment. I think a comment from Ms. Leia Galvez. This is not a question, but in the resource transfer effects, specifically in the legitimization, I remember Tony Gonzaga's interview with PBM.
Yeah, that happens naman. I think legitimization effect, that's very, it happens. Now, if you are in a position of power, if you are in a position of influence, the mere engagement to certain actors would somehow legitimize those actors and the interest and the agenda that they represent, whether or not those legitimizing effect is an unintended or intended. Kaya nga, that's why it's very important na tayo, if we want to work for peace, we need to be more careful with what we do, with whom we engage. Kaya kailangan, we need to do our homework, no? Aralin natin. Kasi the last thing that we would want to do, especially in conflict-affected and conflict-vulnerable areas, is we legitimize bad actors and delegitimize good actors. Yun.
Thank you, Director May. We actually have another question, ma'am. In some outreach projects, we seek the assistance of the local church instead of the local government because of some dynamics in the locality, and we don't want to be affiliated with some politicians. Is this good and consistent with the do no harm principles?
Well, that's a very good example, no? That would depend on the relationship of the church and the relationship of the local government, no? And how the relationship between the church and the local government actually affects the people. Do their relationship divide the people or not? Kasi if their relationship, kumbaga kung may kanya-kanya silang followers, no? And their followers are not very friendly towards each other, to say it in a way, no? So posible, no, if immediately from the very beginning we cut off already, parang part na ng policy natin, oh, we do not work with the LGU, we just work with the church. So baka meron yung it might have an effect, no, in a way that well, maybe some supporters of the local government may find it offensive. So tingnan natin how would that affect on our project. Pero it could also be na if you're there as part of your, say, affiliation of the church, that's why you coordinated with the church, so you can also say it that way, no? Just make sure na pagpapasok po tayo, we do not exacerbate the conflict between the church and the LGU. Kasi baka pag we bypass the authority of the LGU, papasok tayo doon, mamimigay tayo ng goods sa mga tao. Say halimbawa, relief operations, papasok tayo, magbibigay tayo ng goods sa mga tao, hindi tayo magko-coordinate sa LGUs. Nakapagbigay tayo ng goods, but sometimes, magagalit yung local government kasi baka nasira natin yung sistema nila. Baka they have a system of distributing the goods that are coming in. Pero dahil hindi tayo nag-coordinate, baka yung ibang nabigyan natin, nabigyan na pala before. At saka yung mga hindi nabigyan before, there are groups of people na doble-doble yung natanggap, others naman walang natanggap. So we need to look at how those actions, how those decisions could potentially result to bad, potentially bring in bad results.
Thank you so much, Director May. So I think yun po yung ating mga questions from the audience and also reactions. Thank you to our participants and reactors for taking part in the conversation. On behalf of the organizers, I would also like to extend my deepest gratitude to Director May Ballena for sharing with us your knowledge and time for this ACP webinar. Everyone who is part of this event surely learned valuable information and insights which we can continue reflecting on as citizens of this country. To show our gratitude to our resource speaker for accepting our invitation and for your informative and thought-provoking talk this afternoon, we would like to present this Certificate of Appreciation. Citation reads, the Office of Student Affairs, Ateneo de Naga University, presents this Certificate of Appreciation to Director May Estenote Ballena in grateful recognition of her expertise and service as resource speaker in the Alternative Class Program, Do No Harm, Conflict Sensitivity, and Peace Promotion. Held on November 16, 2021, and given this day of November 2021 at Ateneo de Naga University, City of Naga, Philippines. Signed by Mr. Rodolfo S.B. Virtus Jr., Director of Student Affairs, Ms. Janet T. Badong Badilla, Executive Director for Mission and Identity, Dr. Alfredo C. Fabay, Vice President for Higher Education, and Father Roberto E. N. Rivera of the Society of Jesus University President. Thank you so much, Director May. Do you have any final message po to our audience?
Yeah, once again, I thank the Ateneo de Naga University for inviting me and for having me, and of course, to all those who signed up to this ACP. Thank you very much. It's very important, lalo na sa amin, no? It's very important that our young people take interest in matters of peace building, because we do need a lot of young and idealistic and good people to work for peace. So we hope na this ACP have picked your interest in the work that we do. And we hope that eventually you will join us. No, after university, you join us in bringing in, kumbaga ba, in achieving just and lasting peace for the nation, for all Filipinos. Once again, maraming salamat po, and I hope to see you again in wherever. No, thank you.
Thank you so much again, Director May, for being part of this semester's ACP. And I hope that we will have you again in Ateneo, be it virtually or face-to-face. To our dear participants in this ACP webinar, please do not forget to fill out the evaluation form to receive your e-certificates. We will be flashing the link or in the here or in the chat box. Please make sure that you provide the correct information, as it is what will exactly reflect on your certificate. We are grateful for your participation, and we hope to see you all in the future ACP webinars and workshops. Once again, everyone, my name is Dani, and I am honored to have been your host. This ends the Do No Harm, Conflict Sensitivity, and Peace Promotion webinar. Thank you and take care.
I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Changes, changing on the daily. Watch me flip the pages, flipping all the pages of my story. Weightless, I've been feeling weightless, fresher than the daydream. Look at me, I'll change it right before me. I dip when the mood don't feel right. I change like the colors of a sunrise. Not scared of the dark, I'm a highlight. I do what I want to. Stand tall cause I know what I've been through. Talk loud cause I know what I can do. Been down but I know how to get through. I do what I want to. I change with the vibe when I walk in. I'm chasing all that I wanted. On fire cause I know how to spark it. I do